Hello, welcome back to Painting Classic Cars. Our last video on the Jaguar Mark II, great success. Thank you for all that have watched, subscribed and indeed commented. Lots of comments, which is really great, really encouraging. We're taking the view of not responding to all of the comments directly, but actually explaining it a bit further in more content basically. So one that's come up quite frequently, both in that video and we also had a guy comment on the video we did with the Citroen DS, is costings, which is always a bit of a, I don't know, not a sore subject, but one that does take explaining, which is fine. I mean, you should be able to justify your actions and your costings. There seemed to be quite a common thread of £10,000, both with the Citroen DS, a guy sort of estimating around 10 grand to get that sorted out, and a couple of people making comments on the Jag Mark II that, you know, again, the £10,000 figure was thrown around a bit there. A lot's changed, I guess, in the world recently, costings-wise, which we'll come on to later. But just for some sort of perspective, the wings alone on that car were just over £3,000 each, plus the VAT. So already you're looking at well over £6,000 just for two front wings. On top of that, we've got two chassis leg extensions, we've got front cross member, crow's feet, various other small panels, and all the chrome work, the bright work, lights. You know, it all adds up really quickly, and the parts bill on that car was over £10,000 alone. So that's before we've even laid hand to the car. We've spent £10,000, more than £10,000 on parts and panels. It's quite frightening actually how some of this stuff has gone up. We look back to Harry Metcalf's when we were doing his XJ Coupe. I mean, that was 2020, I think. It's quite embarrassing. I was talking to Harry, pricing up various bits and pieces, and prior to Harry's car, the last time we bought an XJ Coupe Sil, we paid £160 there or thereabouts, plus the VAT. If you look now, they're over 400 in a very short space of time. It's just beyond our control, and sadly the way things have gone. Equally, paint costs have gone up, everything's gone up. But as I say, we'll come back to that a little bit later. In terms of hours, we had quoted on that job 280 hours, estimated rather, 280 hours. It did come in at more than that. We charged the 280, but the final timesheet was 308 hours, I believe. So, but we stuck to our estimate of 280. Different businesses run different ways. We try wherever possible to keep to those sort of hours. So that gives you a rough idea as to costings. We're not going to divulge what the customer spent, but it was more than £10,000. Now, the reason I think pricing becomes such a problem, if that's the right word, or such a grey area until you start delving into it, is twofold really, and we'll try and break that down into two sections within this video. So the first one, which might be again a bit of a contentious issue really, I'm sure plenty of others, anyone watching this within the motor trade, would potentially agree that reality TV is the bane of most traders' existence. It's not just the motor trade. I'm sure there's plenty of TV programs about builders, etc., that just, I don't know, it's difficult really. The viewer needs to distinguish the fact that it is TV. It's not real life. I'm not going to pick on wheeler dealers, but I will use them as a prime example. Wheeler dealers is no more a real reflection on the motor trade and the hobby than EastEnders is of life in the East End of London anymore. It's TV, it's entertainment. And I'll stick kind of with wheeler dealers, but there are plenty of others. They're just the main focal point because it's one of the biggest ones. But I did meet Mike Brewer probably 10-15 years back, briefly. Personal taste, each to their own. Not my kind of guy, probably not his kind of guy. Who knows? Pleasant enough fella, but we view things differently. Um, it's, it's always kind of amused me that if you speak to any British person, quite high up on the list of traders you do not trust, which is quite a lengthy list, and the motor trade is on that list, but near the top will always be estate agents, solicitors or accountants, and used car salesmen. And yet somehow we have a used car salesman who has no apparent hands-on ability or skill, is sort of the head honcho and regarded very highly within this industry as an expert who knows what they're doing, which I've always found quite amusing. But getting back to the TV show itself and what it portrays and what it shows, it's just ludicrous. It's not real world. I don't often watch it, so my examples are few and far between because I don't have the time to wipe the TV of all the thrown food at it. But I remember a little while back now they did, they were out in the States and they did a 67, 68 Camaro. No, sorry, it was a 70s Camaro, early 70s Camaro. A bog standard base spec car. And they went through and put a bigger engine in it. They upgraded the brakes. They put chin spoilers on it, which needed painting. They had pinstripes on it. They redid the interior. They did loads and loads and loads of work on this car. And the parts were relatively cheap, especially out in the States. They're even cheaper, obviously. But the total man hours of 55. There's just no way that all of that work was done in 55 hours. In fact, Ed China was with them at the time, and he, throughout the course of the videos, I've got another late night ahead of me pushing on to get. It's just TV, and enjoy it for TV, but it's not the real world. They did a Type 2 camper van, VW. It was a white van, and they ended up having it painted inside and out. So that's a lot of panel area, inside and out, in a orange burnt pearl. So that. Then you've got to put the lacquer onto that, and apparently they added more pearl into the lacquer, so all the material costs are coming up. The man hours on that would be phenomenal because it's a big slab of a van, inside and out. There's a lot of work to go on there, and they're really pleased with the results, even if it did cost us a whopping £3,000. And I mean, we are going back probably 10 years or more on that video, but even then, if you look at an hourly rate and the cost of materials, it can't be done. Now, that's fine, that's great, that's TV. But that transcends into people coming into our and every other body shop saying, how much? On TV, it only costs X amount. It's really actually quite damaging and belittling, I feel, of our trade, because everyone comes in with this idea that we're ripping them off because I've seen on TV that it doesn't take that long. It's all condensed into a half an hour program and made to look like this is just, a couple of weeks worth of work, and the whole vehicle's transformed and ready to go out cruising down the road. And that's just not real world. And again, what I find damaging on that, and a little bit disappointed actually in some of the companies that have taken part in this, is, and they also do it, I've seen on Car SOS they do it as well, where Tim, whatever his surname is, and Mike Brewer does this a lot as well. Well, they'll go into one of the big parts suppliers and they'll be all jovial and having a laugh and a chat. They get together all the bits and pieces that they want and they're told what the price is, and you get the dramatic, oh, I don't know, well, and suddenly the bill's gone from £500 to, let's call it 250 and a big handshake, and we'll say good things about you. And again, that gets into people's psyche where they'll come in and they'll try and emulate that in the real world. We do get it a lot where, I don't know, we'd give a price of £5,000 for a job. And the customer will, not all customers, don't get me wrong, but the mentality is, well, if I offer you £3,000 and I tell you what, we won't worry about the tax man, then you think, try that in other trades, try that in other walks of life, try that with your mortgage advisor. Go and buy your shopping in Tesco's. 140 quid, I tell you what, how about 100 for cash and you carry it out to the car for me? It just, it doesn't work. And I think that whole reality TV segment drives this almost competitive race to the bottom where it's got to be cheap, it's got to be quick, it's got to be perfect. And none of those things happen together. There's a lot of work, which we'll try and sort of highlight in our videos moving forward, but there's a lot of work that goes into producing these vehicles and producing the work that people want. You can't get good, cheap work. You want good work or you want cheap work. And if you want the cheap work, you've got to accept the fact that it's not going to be very good long term. So it really is quite a challenge. As I say, I'm sure it's the same with plumbers, builders, any tradespeople where television companies and production companies have gone out of their way to produce this entertaining reality show. And it's fine, you know, it's entertainment, but it's not really reality. That said, the one show that we do watch collectively here and enjoy and have a huge amount of respect for, it's an American show, and I think the title probably puts off quite a few people in the UK, potentially. Dave Kindig, Bitchin' Rides, they call the show, which get past that and watch it. The work is just phenomenal, what they do there. The standard and the quality is just mind-blowing. But they're also realistic without being preachy about it in any way, and they don't go into great detail as to what things cost. But if you follow the programs, you realize that some of these cars and the projects are in there for years being built. And they do explain how these are thousands of hours. And okay, generally they are show cars, but it also gives you a far greater appreciation and insight into the amount of work that goes into producing these high quality vehicles. You know, if we have someone come in and wants a glass finish paint job, well, no matter who you are or who you claim to be, that doesn't happen straight out the gun. You can lay down a lovely coat of paint, and people can lay down a not so lovely coat of paint. But to get to that glass-like finish, show car finish, you will spend as long wet sanding, machine polishing the paint as you've spent applying the paint and building up to applying the paint. It's not uncommon at Kindig for them to spend 3-4 weeks wet sanding and machine polishing paintwork to get that concourse show finish. Now, the majority of people aren't looking for that in reality, but off the back of things like the reality TV programs we've already mentioned, they'll come in and say, well, I want it like glass. And you think it's our job then to manage expectations and explain what that request A really means and B entails, and trying to explain that you don't get that with a £5,000 blowover. So section 1 really of this video is saying how reality TV really isn't reality. And frankly, it's made our life harder. So thanks, reality TV. That's great. Now, the second part of the pricing battle, I suppose, for want of a better description, touched on earlier, is this race to the bottom, which we're experiencing more and more. Now, things are tight, obviously, economically everywhere. It really is quite some pinch. And it's sometimes hard to be objective, I suppose, in some ways, that we'd be asked to price a job up, and you know, we occasionally get the reaction of, well, you know, I can't really justify that because you know, things have really gone up, and you know, can you do it any cheaper? And I understand, you don't ask, you don't get, but things have gone up, and we're no different. Things have gone up massively for us in terms of costings. I mean, the electricity in the last 2 years has gone up by 150%. Business rates have gone up 40% in the last 2 years. All these costs are going up and up and up. The cost of living means that wage costs are going up, but our income is no different. Since 2019, we have put our hourly rate has gone up by just under 20% in the last 5 years. All our other costs have just gone through the roof. Material costs going up approximately 10% per year. There's a lot of costs increasing, which we have to pass on. We're a business. We're not a charity. And the vast majority of people fully understand that. However, there is, and it's always been the case, and it does seem to be growing somewhat, is every town in this country will have a handful of body shops who are, and again, it's the same in all trades. I'm not saying it's just within our trade. It's certainly the same within all building trades, I know, but there are many body shops in every town working completely under the radar illegally and offering cheap work. Within the UK, there's been, I mean, it's been there for probably 10 years or more, but with the decline in farming and the farming industry, more and more farms now are converting into units, and the amount of body shops that we see springing up on farm sites in buildings that aren't suitable, that don't have, and it's not just farm buildings. I mean, there's various, again, within the UK, we need to have a special permit in the building. It needs to be fit for purpose. And there's plenty of body shops operating in buildings that aren't fit for purpose. No heat, no extraction, no insurance, not paying tax, and so on and so forth. So, and it's always been there, but it's becoming more and more prevalent, I guess, in a cost of living crisis where everyone's trying to keep the costs down. But by doing that, suddenly the cost down price is the baseline. And too frequently, it's human nature. You want a good deal, you want a bargain, you want something as cheap as you can get it within reason, because seldom do people ask, what is the cheap guy missing? What are they not doing? The go-to is the guy who's expensive is ripping me off because this guy will do it for so much less. And there is huge discrepancy in quality, which then knocks on to value for money. It's actually quite a difficult one to just explain. I mean, we have a few examples in at the minute, which I'll run through with you. We are doing a Triumph GT6, which was repainted 5 years ago in a 2K solid. It was fully restored 5 years ago. But there are a few areas where there's some issues, and we've dug into it for the customer. And as you'll be able to see in this video, the problem is the paint adhesion. The vehicle's gone back to bare metal. The filler work has been applied straight onto the bare metal, and then paint straight on top of that. So there's moisture in the material, in the metal. The filler's not properly adhered to the metal, and it's just swollen out and corroded, and it lifts the paint out. So right at the start of the process, it's not had the right process, which means they've paid however much they paid 5 years ago, and it's all lifting off already, which we see quite a lot of. But that would have been a cheaper process because they're doing less processes. We have an XJS in here at the minute, which I'll run through and just show you on this front wing, where at some point in the car's recent past, the door has been painted and they've blended the colour into the front wing, which is correct procedure to get a good fade and a good colour consistency throughout. But then rather than lacquer the whole of the front wing to cover the colour blend, they've blended the lacquer halfway down the wing. And in the 2-3 years since it's been done, you can see clearly where the lacquer has ringed up. You can see a fade line. And you can see where the old lacquer has reacted badly to the sun and crazed and cracked everywhere. And then the back half of the wing, which has got new lacquer on it, is relatively undamaged, which would have been a cheap, possibly Bodyshop, possibly Smart on the driveway repair. Again, the amount of extra effort in just lacquering the whole of that wing was minimal. It would have cost, I don't know. I'm just looking at it now. There's probably an extra £30 worth of material and an extra 15-20 minutes of time, and that whole wing would have been clear coated, and the whole side of that vehicle would have been really nice still. But it's just cheap and quick, cheap and quick, cheap and quick, and it's kind of crippling. But then also, in the same vein, we've got different body shops for different things. Accident repair body shops are accident repair body shops. I know we just did the Jaguar Mark II, which was an accident repair, but we are not an accident repair body shop, in as much as if you're driving down the road in your 18-month-old car, unfortunate enough to have an accident, that car wouldn't come here. We only work on the classic cars, and there is a big difference in the procedures and the processes, which has a knock-on, unfortunately, to the costs, because you're not doing this to get the car looking nice again for the next 18 months until you move it on to the next one. You're doing this to preserve an investment, to enjoy an investment. So longevity is the key within classic car body shop as opposed to accident repair body shop. The two don't really transition very well. And there will also always be, without a cost difference, and indeed a quality difference. There's a body shop locally to us who we saw a couple of years ago had a Mark III Ford Capri come in. It's an accident repair body shop. The car came in bare metal. We saw bits of the process, and again the filler work goes onto the bare metal, the primer goes on top, then the colour goes on. Didn't take them very long to do it. Came out of the body shop looking really nice. And then the first summer it got measles, because all the moisture that's trapped underneath there on the bare metal work is coming through to the surface, and it needs redoing again. The job wasn't a lot of money, but it's been done, the whole car has been redone once more, and there's been repair work to that on top. So in total, some areas of that have been done 3 times now. And that's just not good business sense. When you go back to bare metal on a classic car, there are processes to go through which aren't cheap, but they give you the result that's going to last. So you've got to weigh up, do I want cheap or do I want good? Again, it's this cheap and good don't go hand in hand. Kind of like, I don't know, if you're building your house, you've got to have surveyor's drawings first. And you know, a portrait artist could draw you your extension for 500 quid. Surveyor's going to charge you £2,000 to do it. Architect, a structural engineer, architect is going to charge you that sort of money. Well, the portrait artist can make that look pretty, what you plan to do, but the architect will have the foundations there to make what looks pretty work, stay. You know, I don't know if that's a very good analogy or not, but it's different work to just general accident paint repair, smart repair, etc. And you know, you've got to come into it knowing what it is that you want and being prepared to see it through, because it's not a cheap process if you want it to last. So coming back to the original point of all of this, I suppose, you know, the throwing around of the £10,000, well, we charge out at £65 an hour, which I don't think is a lot of money. You know, if you look at the national averages, and if you look at the mechanics and the garages and so on, even a general garage now is charging £80 to £100 an hour. Main dealers are £140, £150 an hour and more. But the body shop industry has always, unfortunately, had lower hourly rates. And one of the reasons for that is, if you go into your mechanics and you want a job doing, generally, I don't know, the average time, possibly 4 or 5 hours worth of work on your car. So say that's at £100 an hour plus the VAT, well, there's £400–500 is your final bill. Whereas in a body shop, at £65 an hour, you're not going to achieve a lot in 4 or 5 hours of a repair. So if you're having a repaint, you're going to be doing anything from 80 to 300 hours. Times that by £65 an hour, the final bill is massive. So I don't know, it's frustrating and bizarre that my hours work is valued at less simply because the cumulative hours will present a bigger bill. So I'm not wishing to put down any mechanics or anything like that, but you know, £100 an hour, I don't doubt is justifiable. But I feel £100 an hour with us is perfectly justifiable in the amount of work and the skill and all the toxic stuff we're dealing with all the time. So £100 an hour I don't think is unreasonable. But if you're having a repaint done, you know, good quality repaint at say 200 hours, my cumulative charge devalues my hourly rate, which doesn't seem right, but realistically is the way it has to be. Again, you know, if we're in a reality TV show, I'd love to say that it is what it is, but reality is it isn't. If I was charging £100 an hour or more here, then we probably wouldn't get quite so much work. So it'll have such a detrimental effect. So I hope you kind of get where we're going with this, that it's a juggling act all the time between keeping the roof over our heads, both here and domestically, and keeping the customer satisfied and happy, and keeping this hobby, which is what it is, to you anyway, it's my income, but it is to keep that fine balance. It really is difficult, but the days of big works such as the Mark II Jaguar we've done, costing 10,000, or the full restoration of that Citroen DS outside coming in at around 10,000, is sadly those days have gone. So probably once I edit this back, this is quite a long video now, so I hope you're awake. I hope you found the points valid and interesting, and we'll be back with something lighter and probably more single car specific based very soon. So thanks for the support. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe if you haven't already done, and we'll be back soon.